The rain hammered against the kitchen window of the small Brooklyn apartment, each drop racing down the glass like the tears Elena Martinez had been holding back for hours. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting harsh shadows across the cramped space that had been her home for the past 5 years. It was barely 6 in the evening, but the October sky had already surrendered to darkness, matching the void that had opened in her chest. Elena sat at the worn wooden table, her hands trembling as they gripped a legal document. The paper was official, cold, impersonal, stamped with the seal of the New York State Supreme Court. She'd read it 17 times now, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into a different reality. They never did. The defendant, Marcus Daniel Martinez, has been found guilty of first-degree involvement in organized crime activities and aggravated assault resulting in permanent injury. The court hereby sentences the defendant to 25 years to life in Sing Sing Correctional Facility, with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 15 years. 25 years to life. Her baby brother, the kid who used to build blanket forts in their childhood living room, the teenager who'd worked 2 jobs to help her pay for community college, the young man who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket until 6 months ago, when his entire life had been destroyed by a lie. Elena's vision blurred as fresh tears threatened to fall. She pressed her palms against her eyes, refusing to break down again. She'd cried enough in the courthouse when the verdict was read. She'd cried in the holding area when Marcus had hugged her through the glass partition, his handcuffs rattling against the metal frame. She'd cried on the subway ride home, ignoring the uncomfortable stares of other passengers, but crying wouldn't save him. The apartment felt suffocating. Every corner held memories of Marcus. The bookshelf he'd assembled last Christmas, still slightly crooked because he'd insisted he didn't need the instructions. The Spider-Man mug he'd bought her as a joke, claiming she was the superhero of the family. The photograph on the refrigerator showing them at Coney Island last summer, both grinning with cotton candy, unaware that their lives would shatter just 3 months later. Elena stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum floor. She needed to move, to think, to find a solution that didn't exist. She paced the narrow kitchen, her mind racing through the events that had led to this nightmare. Marcus had been working as a delivery driver for a local restaurant in Red Hook. Good tips, flexible hours, saving money for culinary school. Then one night he'd made a delivery to the wrong address, or rather, the right address for all the wrong reasons. He'd walked into the middle of a territorial dispute between 2 rival organizations, witnessed something he shouldn't have, and become a convenient scapegoat when the authorities needed someone to blame. The evidence against him had been circumstantial but overwhelming. His van at the scene, a weapon found in his apartment that he'd never seen before, testimony from 2 witnesses who'd identified him without hesitation. His public defender, an exhausted woman juggling 40 cases, had done her best. But best wasn't enough against a system that had already decided Marcus's guilt before the trial even began. Elena grabbed her phone from the counter, scrolling through her recent calls. She'd contacted everyone she could think of. Marcus's former employers, character witnesses, legal aid organizations, civil rights groups. She'd started a crowdfunding campaign that had raised barely $3,000, not even enough to hire a decent appeals lawyer. She'd written to journalists, posted on social media, begged for help from anyone who would listen. Nothing had worked. The apartment's heating system clanked and groaned, struggling against the October chill. Elena pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She'd skipped lunch again, too nauseous to eat, and her stomach churned with a mixture of hunger and despair. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, its interior nearly empty, except for some wilted lettuce and a carton of expired milk. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her manager at the diner where she worked as a waitress. "Elena, I know you're going through a tough time, but I need to know if you're coming in tomorrow. We're short-staffed." Tomorrow. The word felt meaningless. What did tomorrow matter when Marcus would spend the next 25 years, minimum, in a cell? When he'd be 47 years old before he even had a chance at freedom, if he survived that long. Prison was dangerous, especially for someone like Marcus. Quiet, gentle, completely unprepared for that brutal world. Elena typed back, "I'll be there." She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when Marcus would need commissary money, phone calls, visits. Not when she was barely making rent as it was. Another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. "I have information about your brother's case. Meet me at Sal's coffee shop on Mott Street tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. A friend." Elena stared at the screen, her heart rate accelerating. Scam? Prank? Or something real? She'd posted publicly about Marcus's situation, desperate for any lead. This could be anything. A journalist, another lawyer, or someone looking to take advantage of her desperation. But what choice did she have? She typed back, "Who is this?" The response came quickly. "Someone who knows the truth about what happened to your brother. Someone who can help, but only if you're willing to listen. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late." Elena's hands shook as she set the phone down. Every instinct screamed that this could be dangerous, could be a trap. But those same instincts had told her the justice system would protect her innocent brother, and look how that had turned out. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The rain had intensified, turning the streets below into rivers of reflected neon and headlights. Somewhere out there, Marcus was being processed into the state prison system, stripped of his identity, reduced to a number. The thought made her physically ill. "I'll get you out," she whispered to her reflection. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." The rain answered with thunder, rolling across the Brooklyn sky like a warning. The next day arrived with merciless clarity. Elena had barely slept, her mind churning through possibilities and scenarios until the first gray light of dawn crept through her bedroom curtains. She'd called in sick to the diner, the first time she'd ever done so, and spent the morning in a fog of anxiety and exhausted determination. By 1:30 she was on the subway heading into Manhattan, her reflection staring back at her from the dark window of the train. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing the same jeans and sweater she'd worn yesterday. She hadn't bothered with makeup. What was the point? Sal's coffee shop was located in Little Italy, squeezed between a bakery and a vintage clothing store on Mott Street. The neighborhood had changed over the years, gentrified and touristy, but pockets of old New York still remained. Family-owned businesses that had survived generations, their weathered signs and checkered tablecloths, a defiant middle finger to Starbucks and corporate chains. Elena arrived at 1:55 p.m., her heart pounding as she pushed open the door. A bell chimed above her head. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Small, cramped, with a dozen mismatched tables and the rich aroma of espresso and freshly baked cannoli. An elderly man stood behind the counter, his thick mustache and suspicious eyes marking him as the probable Sal. The lunch crowd had cleared out, leaving only a few scattered customers, a woman typing on a laptop near the window, two elderly men playing chess in the corner, and a younger man in an expensive suit sitting alone at a table in the back. The man in the suit caught Elena's eye immediately. He was maybe 35, with sharp features and dark hair slicked back with precision. He wore a navy three-piece suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent, and a gold watch gleamed at his wrist. But it was his eyes that made Elena pause. Calculating, intelligent, missing nothing. He raised a hand slightly, a gesture so subtle it could have been mistaken for adjusting his cuff, but Elena understood. This was her contact. She approached slowly, every nerve in her body on high alert. As she got closer, she noticed details. A thin scar above his left eyebrow, the precise knot of his burgundy tie, the way his posture suggested both confidence and readiness. This was not a man who got caught off guard. "Miss Martinez," he said as she reached the table. His voice was smooth, cultured, with a hint of a New York accent buried beneath expensive education. "Please sit." Elena remained standing. "Who are you?" A slight smile touched his lips. "Cautious. Good. You'll need that." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "My name is Marco Castellano. I work for someone who can help your brother, but we need to have a conversation first, and standing in the middle of a coffee shop draws attention neither of us wants." Elena glanced around. The chess players hadn't looked up, but she felt Sal's eyes on her from behind the counter. After a moment's hesitation, she sat down, perching on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to flee. Marco pushed a manila envelope across the table. "Inside, you'll find photographs of the two witnesses who testified against your brother. You'll also find documentation of payments they received 3 days before the trial. $10,000 each, deposited into accounts under different names but traceable back to Victor Russo's organization." Elena's hands froze halfway to the envelope. "Victor Russo? She lowered her voice. "The crime boss?" "The same." Marco's expression remained neutral. "He's the one who framed your brother. Marcus witnessed one of Russo's associates attacking a rival family member. Your brother was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Russo needed a convenient fall guy to take the heat off his operation. The weapon planted in your brother's apartment came from Russo's arsenal. The witnesses were paid to lie. The whole case was orchestrated from the beginning. Elena grabbed the envelope with shaking hands, pulling out the contents. Photographs showed two men she recognized from the trial: the delivery driver and the convenience store clerk who'd sworn they'd seen Marcus at the scene, acting aggressively, holding a weapon. Below the photos were bank statements, transaction records, and what looked like surveillance footage, still showing both men meeting with a third man outside a warehouse. "Why are you showing me this?" Elena's voice cracked. "If you have evidence that could exonerate Marcus, why not take it to the police? To his lawyer?" Marco leaned back, his expression hardening. "Because Victor Russo owns half the police force and most of the judges in this city. The evidence would disappear before it reached anyone who mattered. Your brother's lawyer would be warned off or worse. The system that convicted Marcus isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as Russo designed it to." The room felt like it was tilting. Elena gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. "Then what's the point? If Russo's that powerful, if the system is that corrupt, then Marcus is—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Not necessarily." Marco's voice softened slightly. "There's one person in this city who Russo can't touch. One person powerful enough to override judges, to access the real evidence, to force a new trial and ensure justice is actually served." Hope flared in Elena's chest, painful and desperate. "Who?" "My employer." Marco folded his hands on the table. "He's interested in your brother's case. More specifically, he's interested in you." The hope flickered and died, replaced by cold wariness. "Me? Why?" "That's a question you'll need to ask him directly." Marco reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Heavy cardstock embossed with gold lettering. No name, just an address in Manhattan's financial district, and a time, 8 p.m. tonight. Elena stared at the card. "I don't understand. Who is this person? What does he want from me?" "Everything will be explained tonight." Marco stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. "I'll be frank with you, Miss Martinez. My employer doesn't offer help out of charity. He'll want something in return, but he's also your brother's only real chance at freedom. The question is, how far are you willing to go to save him?" "I'd do anything," Elena said immediately, then caught herself. "Anything legal." Marco's expression remained unreadable. "That's between you and him. I'm just the messenger." He picked up the envelope from the table. "I'll keep these for now. If you decide to meet with my employer tonight, you'll get your own copy. If you don't show up," he shrugged, "your brother serves his sentence. Life goes on." "Wait." Elena stood so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Several customers looked over. She lowered her voice. "At least tell me his name." "Who am I meeting?" Marco was already walking toward the door. He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. His dark eyes held something that might have been sympathy or pity. "Dante Romano." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. She gripped the table for support as Marco disappeared through the door, the bell chiming his exit. Around her, the coffee shop continued its mundane existence. Espresso machines hissing, the chess players arguing in Italian, the laptop woman typing away. But Elena's world had just shifted on its axis. Everyone in New York knew the name Dante Romano. He was the ghost story parents told to keep their kids away from crime, the whispered legend that criminals invoked with respect and fear. Law enforcement had been trying to build a case against him for years, but witnesses disappeared, evidence vanished, and anyone who got too close to the truth ended up either dead or silenced. Dante Romano controlled a vast empire, legitimate businesses on the surface, everything from real estate to restaurants to construction companies. But underneath, in the shadows, he ran one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the East Coast. Not drugs, supposedly. He had standards, people said. But everything else was fair game. And now he wanted to meet with her. Elena's phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "The address is real. The time is firm. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Come alone. This is your brother's only chance." Her hands shook as she shoved the phone back into her purse. She needed to think, to process, to figure out what the hell she was going to do. But underneath the fear and confusion, one thought burned clear. Marcus had 15 years minimum before parole. 15 years of hell, unless she did something about it. Elena left the coffee shop, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight that felt too bright, too cheerful for the decision she was facing. She had 7 hours until the meeting. 7 hours to decide if she was brave enough, or desperate enough, to walk into the lion's den. The building stood in the financial district like a monument to power and wealth, all glass and steel, reflecting the evening lights of lower Manhattan in 1,000 glittering windows. A simple gold placard near the entrance read, Romano Enterprises. No other identification needed. Everyone knew who owned this building. Elena stood across the street at 7:45 p.m., her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on black slacks and a simple gray blouse. Professional but not fancy. Conservative but not submissive. She'd pulled her dark hair back into a neat bun and applied minimal makeup, trying to look composed even as her insides churned with terror. This was insane. She knew it was insane. She'd spent the afternoon researching Dante Romano online, finding surprisingly little concrete information but plenty of rumors. The headlines from over the years painted a picture. Romano acquitted again, lack of evidence, frustrates prosecutors. Mysterious fire destroys rival business, Romano denies involvement. Witness in Romano case recants testimony, cites memory problems. Every article, every whispered story, every warning from common sense told her to run, to take the train back to Brooklyn, lock her door and pretend this day had never happened. But then she thought of Marcus, alone, scared, 24 years old and facing a lifetime in prison for something he didn't do. Ellen across the street. The lobby was cathedral-like. Marble floors so polished they reflected like mirrors, soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, abstract art that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. A security desk dominated the center, manned by 2 guards in dark suits who looked more like soldiers than rent-a-cops. One of them, a man with steel gray hair and the build of a retired boxer, looked up as she approached. Name? Elena Martinez. I have an appointment at 8. He consulted a tablet, then nodded curtly. ID, please. Elena handed over her driver's license with trembling fingers. He scanned it, then spoke into a radio too quietly for her to hear. After a moment, he gestured to a private elevator at the far end of the lobby. Top floor. Mr. Castellano will meet you there. No smile. No. Have a nice evening. Just a flat, professional dismissal. Elena took back her ID and walked toward the elevator, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She felt the guard's eyes tracking her every movement. The elevator doors were bronze, elaborately decorated with Art Deco designs. They opened at her approach. Someone had been watching, anticipating her arrival. She stepped inside, and the doors slid shut with a whisper of expensive engineering. The ascent was smooth, almost imperceptible. Soft, classical music played from hidden speakers. Vivaldi, she thought, though she wasn't sure. Numbers ticked upward on a digital display. 20, 30, 40. The building was 63 floors and she was headed to the very top. Elena caught her reflection in the polished bronze doors. She looked small, out of place, like a child playing dress-up in adult spaces. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't let Dante Romano see her fear. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 63rd floor. The doors opened onto a private foyer. More marble, more art, and Marco Castellano waiting with his hands clasped behind his back. Miss Martinez, he said, his tone professional but not unkind. Right on time. Follow me, please. She stepped out of the elevator, her heels clicking against the marble. The doors closed behind her with a definitive sound, cutting off her escape route. Not that she'd been planning to run. Not yet, anyway. Marco led her down a short corridor, past closed doors that likely housed conference rooms and executive offices. The walls were decorated with black and white photographs of New York throughout history. Ellis Island in the 1920s, the Brooklyn Bridge under construction, Little Italy in its heyday. A family's history, Elena realized. Romano's family, tracing their roots through generations. They reached a set of double doors at the corridor's end. Dark wood, ornately carved, substantial enough to belong to a medieval castle. Marco knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. Mr. Romano, Miss Martinez has arrived. Send her in. The voice that answered was deep, controlled, with an accent that spoke of old New York money and Italian heritage. It was the kind of voice that expected obedience, that had never needed to shout to be heard. Elena stepped through the doors into an office that defied her expectations. She'd anticipated something ostentatious, gold fixtures, leather furniture, the trappings of obvious wealth. Instead, The space was surprisingly understated. Modern, but not flashy. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, positioned to face floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan's nighttime skyline. Bookshelves lined two walls filled with actual books, leather-bound volumes, first editions, the collection of someone who genuinely read. And behind the desk, silhouetted against the city lights, sat Dante Romano. He stood as she entered, a gesture that surprised her. She'd expected arrogance, condescension. Instead, he moved with quiet grace, walking around the desk to greet her. As he stepped into the light, Elena got her first clear look at the man who controlled so much of New York's shadows. He was younger than she'd imagined, late 30s at most, though his eyes suggested someone who'd lived much longer. Tall, maybe 6'2", with the lean build of someone who stayed fit without making a show of it. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, worn with the ease of someone who never thought about what he was wearing. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples, a strong jaw, and eyes so dark they were almost black. But it was his presence that struck her most. He didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. Power radiated from him like heat, filling the room, making the spacious office feel suddenly intimate and dangerous. "Miss Martinez," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Elena hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, brief, professional. She'd expected something different, a power play, a lingering touch, something to establish dominance. Instead, he released her hand immediately and gestured to a chair facing his desk. "Please sit. Would you like something to drink? Water, coffee, wine?" "No, thank you." Elena's voice came out steadier than she'd expected. She sat down, keeping her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. Behind Romano, the city glittered like a field of stars. It was disorienting, beautiful, exactly the kind of view that reminded visitors how high up they were. Romano returned to his desk, settling into his chair with the ease of someone completely comfortable in his domain. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You're wondering why you're here," he said finally. "What I want. What this is going to cost you." "Yes. No point in dancing around it. Direct. I appreciate that." Romano opened a drawer and pulled out the same manila envelope Marco had shown her earlier. He slid it across the desk. "The evidence that will exonerate your brother. Bank records, photographs, witness statements, everything you need to prove Victor Russo framed him." Elena's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope, pulling out its contents. More detailed than what she'd glimpsed at the coffee shop. Transaction records with names, dates, amounts, photographs of Russo's men meeting with the witnesses, even a notarized statement from someone willing to testify about the frame-up. "This is," her voice cracked, "this is everything. With this, Marcus could be freed in months, maybe weeks." "Yes." Elena looked up sharply. "Why? Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't know Marcus. What do you want in return?" Romano leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. The gesture should have looked pretentious, theatrical. Instead, it simply looked like a man considering his next move in a long game. "Tell me, Miss Martinez, what do you know about me?" The question threw her. I know your reputation. People say you're—" She stopped herself, suddenly aware of how dangerous honesty might be. "Dangerous?" Romano supplied, a slight smile touching his lips. "Ruthless? A criminal? All true. I won't insult your intelligence by denying it." He stood walking to the windows, his silhouette dark against the glowing city. "But I'm also a businessman, and right now I have a business problem that you can solve." Elena's stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" He turned to face her, backlit by Manhattan. "I'm in the process of expanding my legitimate operations. I've spent the last 5 years transitioning from, let's call them, gray areas into businesses that can withstand scrutiny. Real estate development, restaurant franchises, import-export operations. Clean, legal, profitable. Congratulations," Elena said dryly, unable to help herself. Romano's smile widened slightly. "There's a catch. Many of the people I need to do business with, politicians, bankers, corporate boards, they're uncomfortable with my reputation. They want the veneer of respectability before they'll engage in partnerships that could be mutually beneficial. They want to believe I'm a reformed man, a legitimate businessman. So reform," Elena said. "Stop doing illegal things." "I have." Romano's tone was matter of fact. "For the most part. But reputations are harder to change than behavior." I need something that will signal to New York's establishment that I'm a changed man, something that will open doors currently closed to me. The puzzle pieces clicked into place in Elena's mind, and she felt her blood run cold. You need a wife. I need the right kind of wife, Romano corrected, returning to his desk. Someone with no connections to my world. Someone who can't be accused of being part of my organization. Someone who appears to have tamed the untamable Dante Romano through love and virtue. He sat down, his dark eyes fixed on her. Someone exactly like you. Elena's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. You're asking me to marry you? I'm proposing a business arrangement. Romano's tone remained calm, reasonable, as if he were discussing a real estate transaction. A marriage in name only, designed to serve specific purposes. You would become Elena Romano, my wife in the eyes of the law and society. You would attend social functions with me, be photographed with me, present the image of a normal, stable relationship. In exchange for freeing my brother. Yes. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. That's insane. You can't just buy a wife like you're buying a car or a piece of property. I'm not buying you, Romano said, his voice sharpening slightly. I'm offering you a trade. Your brother's freedom in exchange for 2 years of your time. After that period, we'll have a quiet, dignified divorce. You'll walk away with a substantial settlement. Enough money to rebuild your life, finish your education, start over however you choose. Your brother will be free, his record expunged, his future returned to him. 2 years, Elena repeated, her voice hollow. 24 months. During that time, you would live in a separate residence I own, a penthouse in Tribeca, fully furnished, all expenses covered. You'd have your own space, your own life. I would only require your presence at specific events, charity galas, business dinners, the occasional public appearance, perhaps 4 or 5 times a month. Elena stood abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. She walked to the windows, staring out at the city that suddenly felt like a prison. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, going on dates, falling in love honestly, not bargaining their futures to save their families. What about physical? She couldn't finish the question. The arrangement would be strictly professional, Romano said from behind her. No physical intimacy. Separate bedrooms, separate lives. I'm not interested in forcing anything on you, Miss Martinez. That's not how I operate. She turned to face him. Isn't it? Isn't that exactly what this is? You're using my desperation, my love for my brother, to force me into a situation I would never choose otherwise. I'm offering you a choice you wouldn't have otherwise, Romano countered. Without my help, your brother spends the next 15 to 25 years in prison. With it, he's free in a matter of months. Yes, the price is high, but it's a price you have the power to accept or reject. That's more of a choice than most people in your situation ever get. Elena wanted to argue, to throw his twisted logic back in his face, but the terrible truth was that he was right. She had no other options. No appeals lawyer would take Marcus's case without payment she couldn't afford. The evidence of his innocence would remain hidden in Romano's hands, unless she agreed to his terms. Why me? She asked quietly. You're rich, powerful, attractive. You could have any woman in New York. Why force someone who doesn't want you? Romano was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held a note of something that might have been respect. Because any woman who would willingly marry me knowing what I am would be suspect. The establishment would see through an arrangement with a socialite or an actress looking to climb the ladder. But you? He gestured toward her. You're a waitress from Brooklyn. You have no connections to my world. No ulterior motives except saving your brother. When people see us together, they'll see a man who fell for someone outside his usual sphere. Someone genuine. Someone who humanizes the monster. I'm not a prop, Elena said, her voice hardening. No, Romano agreed. You're a woman in an impossible situation, making the hardest choice of your life. I respect that, even if you don't believe me. Elena turned back to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Behind her, Romano remained still, waiting. He knew he had her cornered, knew she had nowhere else to turn. If I say no, she said to her reflection, what happens to the evidence? It remains in my possession. Your brother serves his sentence. And if I say yes, we'll have a contract drawn up by my lawyers. Specific terms, protections for both parties, clearly defined expectations. You'll have 48 hours to review it with your own legal counsel before signing. Once signed, I'll immediately begin the process of getting your brother a new trial. The evidence will be delivered to the appropriate authorities through channels that can't be traced back to either of us. Marcus will likely be released within 3 to 6 months. 6 months. Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. 6 months versus 15 years minimum. The choice shouldn't even be a choice. She thought of Marcus in his cell right now, scared, alone, believing his life was over before it had really begun. What would he tell her to do? He'd probably tell her to walk away, to not sacrifice herself for him. He'd always been protective of her, even though she was the older sibling. But Marcus wasn't here. This was her decision. Elena turned around slowly, meeting Dante Romano's dark eyes across the expanse of his office. The city glittered behind him like a kingdom he owned, because in many ways he did. "I have conditions," she said. Something flickered in Romano's expression. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "I'm listening. First, I want the contract to include protection for Marcus after his release. Russo framed him once. I want guarantees he won't try again. I want my brother to be untouchable." "Agreed." "Second, I maintain my job at the diner. I don't care if it looks odd for your wife to be working as a waitress. I'm not giving up my independence completely." Romano paused, considering. "That could complicate the narrative, but acceptable. Though I'll provide you with a substantial monthly allowance whether you work or not. Third," Elena's voice strengthened, "you treat me with respect. I don't care what people think this marriage is, but in private, you don't talk down to me, don't dismiss me. Don't treat me like I'm your property. I'm a human being agreeing to help you, not a possession you bought." This time, Romano stood, walking around his desk until he was just a few feet away from her. Up close, he was even more imposing, taller, broader, radiating that quiet power that made her want to step back, even as she forced herself to hold her ground. "Miss Martinez," he said quietly, "despite what you may believe about me, I've never treated anyone as property. You'll have my respect because you've already earned it. Coming here tonight, facing me, negotiating rather than simply accepting, that takes courage." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Elena stared at his hand. This was it. The moment that would change everything. 2 years of her life in exchange for her brother's freedom. A marriage without love to a man who lived in the shadows. A bargain with the devil himself if the rumors were to be believed. But when she thought of Marcus, his smile, his laugh, his dreams of becoming a chef, she knew there was only one answer she could give. She reached out and clasped Romano's hand. "We have a deal." Romano's grip was firm, warm, lasting just a moment longer than necessary. Then he released her hand and returned to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. "Marco, bring in the preliminary documents." The doors opened almost immediately. Marco Castellano entered carrying a leather portfolio, which he placed on Romano's desk, before nodding to Elena and exiting as silently as he'd arrived. Romano opened the portfolio, extracting a thick stack of papers. "This is a preliminary agreement, the basic framework of our arrangement. My legal team will draft a full contract within the next 48 hours, but I want you to understand the core terms tonight." He laid out the pages, turning them so Elena could read. The document was intimidating. Dense legal language, multiple clauses, subsections labeled with Roman numerals and lettering, but Romano walked her through it methodically, his finger tracking the relevant passages. Section 1. Duration of agreement. 24 months from the date of marriage, with the possibility of early termination only under specific circumstances, breach of contract, threat to physical safety, or mutual consent. Section 2. Financial arrangements. You'll receive a monthly allowance of $15,000, separate from all living expenses which I'll cover. Upon completion of the full term, you'll receive a one-time payment of $2 million. Elena's head snapped up. $2 million? Tax-free, Romano continued as if he hadn't noticed her shock. Additionally, any property you acquire during our marriage in your name alone will remain yours after the divorce. Section 3. Living arrangements. You'll reside in the Tribeca penthouse address provided in Appendix A. I'll maintain my primary residence elsewhere. We'll coordinate schedules for public appearances but otherwise maintain separate lives. He flipped to another page. Section 4. Public expectations. You'll attend approximately 4 to 6 events per month with me. Charity galas, business dinners, occasional social functions. You'll be photographed, likely written about in society pages. You'll need to present a united front, appear comfortable with me in public, give the impression of a genuine relationship, act like I'm in love with you. Elena said flatly. Act like you're comfortable being married to me, Romano corrected. I'm not asking you to fake overwhelming passion. Just warmth, partnership, the kind of ease long-term couples develop. Can you do that? Elena thought about the alternative. Marcus in prison for the next 15 years. Yes. Romano nodded, continuing through the document. Section 5. Privacy and discretion. You will not discuss the true nature of our arrangement with anyone outside of this agreement. To the world, we're a legitimate couple who met, fell for each other, and married. Breaking this confidentiality clause would result in immediate termination of the contract and forfeiture of the final settlement. You mean I can't tell anyone this is fake? You can tell one person, a single confidant of your choosing, listed in the contract. Choose wisely. Beyond that, the illusion must be maintained. Social media, conversations with friends, everything. The more people who know the truth, the greater the risk of exposure. Elena's mind reeled. 2 years of lying to everyone she knew, pretending to be Mrs. Dante Romano, wife of one of New York's most powerful and dangerous men, playing a role every time she left the penthouse. Section 6, Romano continued. Protection agreements. As you requested, your brother Marcus will be placed under my protection following his release. Victor Russo and his organization will be warned off. Any attempt to retaliate against Marcus or you will be considered a direct attack against me, and responded to accordingly. What does that mean exactly? Responded to accordingly? Romano met her eyes. It means your brother becomes untouchable. Russo may control parts of this city, but I control more. He won't risk a war over this. Not with me. The casual confidence with which he said it should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded Elena exactly who she was dealing with. A man who thought in terms of wars and territories, who protected what was his with absolute ruthlessness. There are additional clauses, Romano said, flipping through more pages. Stipulations about behavior. No public intoxication, no scandals that could damage either of our reputations. Provisions for handling the press. For what happens if either of us develops a romantic interest in someone else during the contract period. Elena blinked. Wait, what? It's 2 years, Miss Martinez. I'm not requiring celibacy, just discretion. If you meet someone, have a relationship, that's your business as long as it remains private. The same applies to me. Our personal lives remain our own as long as they don't interfere with the public arrangement. It was the most coldly practical conversation about marriage Elena had ever heard. Then again, this wasn't really a marriage. It was a business deal dressed up in legal paperwork and wedding rings. Romano closed the portfolio. You'll receive the full contract tomorrow. Read every word. Have a lawyer review it. I'll provide a list of attorneys not connected to me if you don't have one. Make sure you understand exactly what you're agreeing to. And the evidence about Marcus. When do I get that? You'll receive your own copy the moment you sign the contract. I'll begin the process of exposing Russo's frame-up within 24 hours of our legal marriage. I have prosecutors who owe me favors, judges who value my goodwill. Your brother's case will be reopened, reviewed, and likely dismissed within 4 to 6 months. Elena's throat tightened. 4 to 6 months. It felt like forever and no time at all, but it was infinitely better than 15 years. She looked at the man across the desk from her. Dante Romano, crime boss, businessman, manipulator. A man who'd just offered her salvation with a devil's bargain attached. Why? She asked again. Why go through all this trouble? There has to be an easier way to improve your reputation. Romano was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. You want the truth? He said finally. Power without legitimacy is unstable. I've built an empire in the shadows. But shadows can't last forever. I'm 38 years old, Miss Martinez. I've spent 20 years in this life, and I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I want to build something that will outlast me. Businesses my children could inherit without shame. A legacy that's more than whispered stories and fear. You have children? No. But someday I might want to. And when I do, I don't want them growing up with my reputation hanging over them. He stood, walking to the windows again, his hands in his pockets. My father was a good man who got caught up in a bad world. He wanted better for me, but I was young and stupid and thought I knew better. Now I'm old enough to realize he was right, but too deep in to simply walk away. This marriage, this arrangement with you, it's my way of building a bridge from what I was to what I could be. There was something in his voice, not vulnerability exactly, but honesty, that felt almost painful. Elena realized she'd never expected Dante Romano to be human. She'd built him up in her mind as a monster, a force of nature, something other than a man who might actually have regrets. "I'll read the contract," she said quietly. "All of it, and I'll make my decision." Romano turned, and for just a moment, Elena could have sworn she saw relief in his expression, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "That's all I ask." He walked to his desk and pulled out a business card, different from the one Marco had given her, with an actual phone number printed on it. "This is my direct line. Day or night, if you have questions, concerns, anything, call me." Elena took the card, her fingers brushing against his. She shoved it into her purse quickly as if it might burn her. "Marco will take you home," Romano continued, pressing the button on his phone again. "A car is waiting downstairs." "And Miss Martinez?" She'd already started toward the door but paused, looking back. "You surprised me tonight," Romano said. "Most people in your position would have simply agreed to anything I asked. You negotiated. You set boundaries. That tells me I made the right choice." Elena wasn't sure if that was a compliment or just another manipulation. With Dante Romano, she suspected it might be both. "Good night, Mr. Romano." "Dante," he corrected gently. "If we're going to be married, even in name only, you should probably get used to using my first name." The word felt foreign in her mouth, dangerous somehow. "Good night, Dante." His smile was slight but genuine. "Good night, Elena." The ride back to Brooklyn was a blur. Marco had placed her in the back of a luxury sedan. Leather seats, tinted windows. The kind of car that probably cost more than Elena had earned in her entire life. He'd given her the manila envelope containing the evidence against Russo, told her to keep it somewhere safe, and disappeared back into Romano Tower. Now Elena sat alone in the back seat as the driver navigated through Manhattan's nighttime traffic, the envelope heavy in her lap. Through the window she watched the city pass. Tourists in Times Square, couples walking hand in hand through the village, normal people living normal lives. In 48 hours she might agree to stop being one of them. Her phone buzzed. A text from the prison. "You have a scheduled call with inmate Marcus Martinez tomorrow at 10 a.m. Elena's eyes burned with tears she'd been holding back for hours. What would she tell him? That she'd found a way to save him but couldn't explain how? That she was about to marry a stranger, a dangerous stranger, to buy his freedom? Marcus would hate it. Would probably try to talk her out of it. Tell her not to sacrifice herself for him. But he wouldn't understand that it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a choice. Maybe not a good choice, but it was hers to make. The car pulled up outside her Brooklyn apartment building, shabby, familiar home. The driver got out and opened her door. Another gesture that felt surreal. Elena climbed out, clutching the envelope, feeling like she was smuggling secrets. "Miss Martinez," the driver said before she could walk away. He was an older man, maybe 60, with kind eyes and graying hair. "I don't know what Mr. Romano offered you tonight, but I've worked for him for 15 years, and I'll tell you this, he keeps his word. Always. Whatever he promised, he'll deliver." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. She turned and walked into her building, climbing the 3 flights to her apartment. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door and she almost dropped the envelope. Inside, the apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Small, cramped, filled with memories and unpaid bills and the ghost of her brother's laughter. Elena set the envelope on the kitchen table, staring at it like it might explode. This was her brother's freedom, his future, everything she'd been desperate to find. And all it would cost was 2 years of her life, married to a man she'd just met. A man who controlled an empire from the shadows. A man whose respect she'd somehow earned by standing up to him. Elena pulled out her phone and looked at Dante Romano's business card. The raised lettering seemed to glow in the dim kitchen light. One call could change everything. Or she could throw the card away, return the envelope, let Marcus serve his sentence, and live with the guilt for the rest of her life. The choice should have been impossible. But when Elena closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face. Young, scared, innocent, and knew there was no choice at all. She'd call tomorrow, read the contract, sign her name on the dotted line, and become Mrs. Dante Romano. 3 days after her meeting with Dante Romano, Elena sat in a small law office in Midtown Manhattan, staring at a contract that would define the next 2 years of her life. The office belonged to Sarah Chen, an attorney Romano had recommended from his list of independent counsel, lawyers who had no financial ties to his organization and could be trusted to protect Elena's interests. Sarah was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the document for the 3rd time. Elena watched her, trying to gauge whether the attorney thought she was making a terrible mistake. But Sarah's expression remained neutral, clinical. "It's thorough," Sarah said finally, looking up. "More thorough than most prenuptial agreements I've seen. The financial protections are substantial. The monthly allowance, the final settlement, even provisions for cost of living adjustments. And this clause here," she tapped a section with her pen, "gives you the right to terminate the agreement immediately if you feel physically unsafe, with full financial compensation." "What about my brother?" Elena asked. It was the question she had asked at least 5 times already. "The protection clause is ironclad. Once your brother is released, he's covered under what the contract calls extended family security provisions. Romano is legally obligating himself to ensure your brother's safety. If anything happens to Marcus, you can terminate the contract and keep everything you've been paid, plus the full $2 million settlement." Elena's hands were clammy. The office felt too warm despite the October chill outside. Through the window she could see people walking past on the street, normal people with normal problems, not deciding whether to marry a man they barely knew to save their brother from prison. "Is there anything in here that worries you?" Elena asked. "As my lawyer, I mean. Is there something I'm missing?" Sarah set down her pen and removed her glasses, meeting Elena's eyes directly. "Honestly, the contract itself is fair, surprisingly fair. Romano's lawyers could have buried clauses that would give him more control, but they didn't. You have genuine protections here. What worries me is what's not in the contract." "What do you mean?" "This document covers the legal and financial aspects of your arrangement. It doesn't cover the emotional reality of spending 2 years pretending to be married to someone you don't love. It doesn't address how you'll feel when you have to smile for cameras while standing next to a man whose reputation includes—" Sarah paused delicately. "Activities that most people find troubling." "You mean his criminal connections?" "I mean exactly that." Sarah leaned forward. "Elena, I'm not here to judge your choices. You're an adult in a desperate situation, and legally speaking, this contract gives you substantial protection and compensation. But as someone who's been practicing law for 20 years, I've seen what happens when people enter arrangements like this thinking they can keep their emotions separate. It's harder than you imagine." Elena thought about the past 3 days. She'd called Marcus, talking to him through the prison phone system, her heart breaking at how defeated he sounded. She hadn't told him about Romano or the deal. She'd just promised him that she was working on something, that he shouldn't give up hope. She'd researched Dante Romano obsessively, reading every article she could find. The legitimate businesses, a restaurant empire that employed hundreds, real estate developments that had revitalized struggling neighborhoods, charitable donations to organizations supporting Italian-American communities, and the darker rumors, connections to organized crime families, allegations that never resulted in convictions, witnesses who disappeared before trials. But the man she'd met in that office hadn't matched the monster she'd expected. He'd been direct, honest about what he wanted, respectful even when he held all the power. That almost made it worse. It would be easier if he were obviously terrible. "I understand the risks," Elena said quietly, "but my brother has 15 years minimum before parole. 15 years of his life gone. I can survive 2 years of pretending if it means saving him from that." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Then as your attorney, I'm satisfied that you understand what you're agreeing to. The contract is solid, your interests are protected, and the terms are clear. If you want to proceed, I'll arrange for the signing." Elena took a deep breath. "Let's do it." 2 hours later, Elena sat in a different office, this one in Romano Tower, on the 63rd floor where she'd first met Dante. The space had been converted into a makeshift signing room, with a long conference table and 3 lawyers present: Sarah Chen, a notary public, and a stern-looking man in his 60s who Romano introduced as his personal attorney, Victor Castellano, Marco's father apparently. Dante himself stood by the windows giving Elena space, letting her take the lead. He'd dressed more casually today, dark slacks and a white dress shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled to his forearms. It should have made him look less intimidating. It didn't. "Miss Martinez," Victor Castellano said, his voice gravelly from decades of courtroom arguments, "before we proceed, I need to verbally confirm that you understand the terms of this agreement and are entering into it of your own free will." "I understand. You're aware that this contract represents a marriage of convenience, with no expectation of romantic involvement?" "Yes." You understand that you'll be required to maintain the public appearance of a genuine marriage for a period of 24 months? I do. Victor's mouth twitched slightly at her word choice. You understand the financial arrangements, the living situation, and the terms under which the contract can be terminated? Yes, I understand everything. The attorney nodded, apparently satisfied. He gestured to the contract laid out on the table. 2 copies, both thick as phone books. Then let's proceed. The signing took 40 minutes. Elena had to initial dozens of pages, sign her full name multiple times, have each signature witnessed and notarized. It felt surreal, like she was signing her life away one page at a time, which, in a sense, she was. Dante signed his portions without hesitation, his handwriting bold and confident. Each time he finished a page, he slid it across to Elena, their fingers never quite touching. She noticed he was left-handed, an odd detail to stick in her mind, but everything felt odd right now. Finally, it was done. The notary stamped the final pages with official seals, declaring the contract legally binding. Victor and Sarah each took a copy for their files. Elena received her own copy in a leather portfolio that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Congratulations, Victor said dryly. You're now contractually engaged to be married. Dante extended his hand to Elena. Thank you for trusting me with this. Elena shook his hand, trying to ignore how warm it was, how steady. When will you start the process for Marcus? Tonight. Dante's dark eyes were serious. I have a meeting scheduled with a prosecutor who owes me a favor. The evidence against Russo will be delivered through an anonymous source tomorrow morning. By the end of the week, there should be enough movement to warrant reopening your brother's case. Relief flooded through Elena so intensely she felt lightheaded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We both have our parts to play. Dante released her hand and turned to his attorney. Victor, arrange for the marriage license. I want the ceremony scheduled within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Elena's voice came out higher than intended. That's really fast. The longer we wait, the more questions people ask about why we're rushing into marriage. Better to maintain momentum. Whirlwind romance swept off our feet, couldn't wait. Dante's tone was practical, like he was discussing a business merger, which Elena supposed he was. Is there a problem with the timeline? Elena thought about everything that would need to happen in 2 weeks. Telling people she was getting married, moving out of her apartment, becoming Mrs. Dante Romano. Her stomach churned. No problem, she lied. 2 weeks is fine. 12 days later, Elena stood in a private room at City Hall wearing a cream-colored dress she'd bought at Macy's for $300. It was simple, elegant, appropriate for a courthouse wedding. Not the white gown she'd once imagined wearing someday, but this wasn't that kind of wedding. The room was small, utilitarian, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Besides Elena and Dante, only a handful of people were present. Marco Castellano serving as Dante's witness, Sarah Chen as Elena's, the officiant, and a photographer Dante had hired to document the occasion. We need photos for the press, he'd explained when Elena questioned the photographer's presence. Evidence that this was a real wedding, not some secretive arrangement. Elena's hands trembled as she held the small bouquet of white roses Dante had provided. She told no one about the wedding except Sarah. Not her friends, not her co-workers at the diner, and especially not Marcus. She'd called him the night before, talking about nothing important, memorizing the sound of his voice. In a few months, if everything went according to plan, he'd be free. That was what mattered. Dante stood beside her in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, looking every bit the successful businessman. To anyone watching, they might have seemed like a normal couple, maybe a bit formal, but courthouse weddings were often understated affairs. The officiant, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at them warmly. Are we ready to begin? Dante looked at Elena. Ready? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Dearly beloved, the officiant began, launching into the standard ceremony script. Elena barely heard the words. Her mind kept drifting, watching this moment from outside her body. This couldn't be real. She couldn't actually be marrying Dante Romano. Elena Maria Martinez, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health until death do you part? The words hung in the air. Everyone waited. Elena felt the weight of the moment, the lie she was about to tell, the vow she was about to make with no intention of keeping it. Her eyes met Dante's. His expression was unreadable, but something in his gaze steadied her. I do. Dante Alessandro Romano, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health until death do you part? I do. Dante's voice was firm, confident, like he made vows every day. The rings. Marco stepped forward, producing 2 simple platinum bands from his pocket. They'd picked them out together 3 days ago. Elena had wanted something understated, nothing flashy. Dante had agreed, without argument. Dante took Elena's hand gently, sliding the ring onto her finger. His hands were warm, steady, careful not to hurt her. The ring fit perfectly. Elena swallowed hard and took his hand in turn, slipping the matching band onto his finger. It felt impossibly intimate, this ritual, even knowing it meant nothing. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The officiant beamed. You may kiss the bride. Elena's heart stopped. They hadn't discussed this part, hadn't practiced. She'd assumed it would be a quick peck, perfunctory and meaningless. Dante leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. Then his lips touched hers, warm, soft, lasting only a few seconds but feeling like an eternity. When he pulled back, his dark eyes searched hers. Okay? He murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. Elena nodded, still too stunned to speak. The photographer's camera flashed, capturing the moment. More photos followed, cutting the small cake Dante had arranged, signing the marriage certificate, posed shots of the happy couple with their witnesses. Elena smiled until her face hurt, playing her role perfectly. An hour later, she was legally Mrs. Dante Romano. The penthouse in Tribeca was nothing like Elena had imagined. She'd expected ostentation, marble columns, gold fixtures, the kind of excessive wealth that screamed, crime boss. Instead, the space was surprisingly tasteful. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline. Hardwood floors gleamed under warm lighting. The furniture was modern but comfortable. A large sectional sofa, a dining table that could seat 8, a kitchen with professional-grade appliances. Original artwork decorated the walls, not the mass-produced prints she'd seen in furniture stores, but actual paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, Marco explained, giving Elena a tour while Dante handled something at his office. Master suite is through here. 2 guest rooms on the opposite side of the penthouse. Building has 24-hour security, concierge service, private gym on the ground floor. Elena followed him through the space, trying to absorb it all. The master bedroom was enormous. A California king bed with pristine white linens, a walk-in closet bigger than her entire Brooklyn apartment, a bathroom with a soaking tub and separate glass shower. Mr. Romano had your belongings moved from your apartment yesterday, Marco continued. Your clothes are in the closet, personal items in the bathroom and bedroom. If anything was missed or you need something, just let me know. My apartment. The lease has been terminated. Security deposit and final month's rent refunded. Your landlord was compensated for early termination. Marco's tone was matter-of-fact. Mr. Romano thought it best to handle the logistics quickly. Elena felt a flash of irritation. He could have asked me first. Would you have preferred to pack yourself? Sort through everything? Honestly, no. The thought of packing up 5 years of her life, of explaining to her neighbors why she was leaving, would have been torture. But she still didn't like having decisions made for her. Where does Dante stay? She asked, changing the subject. Mr. Romano maintains a residence in the West Village. You'll coordinate schedules for public appearances, but day to day, you'll have your privacy here. Marco showed her the rest of the penthouse. A home office with a desk and built-in bookshelves, a laundry room, a balcony that wrapped around 2 sides of the building. Everything was perfect, expensive, and utterly foreign. If you need anything, my number is programmed into your phone under Household Manager, Marco said. Groceries, maintenance, transportation, anything at all. There's also a household account set up for your use. Credit cards in the kitchen drawer. I don't need Mrs. Romano, please. Marco's stern expression softened slightly. This is part of the arrangement. Mr. Romano wants you to be comfortable here. Let him provide what's necessary. Mrs. Romano. The name sent a chill through her. She was actually someone's wife now, even if it was all pretend. After Marco left, Elena stood in the middle of the living room, feeling small in the vast space. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered with possibility and promise, a city where dreams came true for some people and turned into nightmares for others. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dante. Hope the penthouse is acceptable. I'll pick you up Friday at 7 p.m. for dinner. First public appearance, dress code is formal. Elena stared at the message. This was her life now. Designer penthouses, formal dinners, playing the role of devoted wife to a man she'd known for less than 3 weeks. She walked to the master bedroom, opening the closet. Her clothes from Brooklyn looked pathetic, hanging next to empty spaces, clearly meant for a larger wardrobe. But mixed in with her modest dresses and work uniforms were new additions, elegant dresses still bearing designer tags, shoes in her size, even jewelry in velvet boxes. He'd been shopping for her. The thought was disturbing and oddly thoughtful at the same time. Elena pulled out one of the new dresses, a midnight blue silk that probably cost more than she made in a month. She held it up to herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was still her, but also somehow different. A stranger wearing an expensive dress in a stranger's home, married to a stranger who controlled half of New York. Her phone rang, making her jump. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, their scheduled weekly call from prison. Elena answered, trying to sound normal. Hey, little brother. Elena. Marcus's voice sounded strained. Something weird happened today. A guard pulled me aside, said my case is being reviewed. That new evidence has come up. Do you know anything about this? Her heart raced. It was working. Dante had kept his word. I've been trying to get attention on your case. Posted more on social media, reached out to some journalists. Maybe someone finally listened. The guard said it could take a few months, but they might grant a new trial. Elena, if this is real, his voice broke. I don't want to get my hopes up, but God, if there's a chance. Tears streamed down Elena's face. Don't give up hope, Marcus. Things are happening. I can't explain everything right now, but just trust me, okay? I trust you. A pause. Are you okay? You sound different. Elena looked at the platinum band on her finger, at the luxury penthouse around her, at the life she'd traded for his freedom. I'm fine. Just tired. Working a lot. They talked for another 10 minutes before the call was automatically disconnected. Elena sat on the edge of the massive bed, clutching the phone, letting herself cry properly for the first time since signing the contract. She'd done it. The deal was real, and Marcus had a chance now. Whatever came next, whatever she had to endure for the next 2 years, it would be worth it. Friday arrived too quickly. Elena spent the day in a state of nervous anxiety, trying on different dresses, practicing what she'd say when people asked how she and Dante met. They'd agreed on a story. She'd been working at a restaurant he owned. They'd gotten to talking. One thing led to another. Simple, believable, boring enough not to generate too many follow-up questions. At exactly 7 p.m., the penthouse intercom buzzed. Mrs. Romano, your husband is here. Elena took one last look in the mirror. She'd chosen a simple black dress, elegant, but not too flashy, paired with modest jewelry and heels that made her 3 inches taller. Her dark hair was styled in loose waves, makeup carefully applied to look natural. She rode the elevator down to the lobby, her stomach in knots. Dante stood near the entrance, talking quietly with the building's security guard. He wore a black suit with a silver tie, looking every bit the powerful businessman. When he saw her, his expression shifted. Approval, maybe, or appreciation. You look beautiful, he said, offering his arm. Thank you. Elena took his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. Where are we going? Il Forno, one of my restaurants. The owner is a friend, and it's a popular spot for the social crowd. We'll be seen, photographed, gossiped about. Exactly what we need. A black car waited at the curb, Marco behind the wheel. The drive to the restaurant took 20 minutes through Manhattan traffic. Dante spent most of it briefing Elena on who they'd likely encounter. Antonio and Maria Rossi, old family friends. They'll ask intrusive questions, but they mean well. Grant Morrison, city councilman, ambitious but harmless. Victoria Chen, society columnist, writes for the Post. Be polite to her. She can make or break reputations with a single article. Elena's head spun, trying to remember names and relationships. How do you keep track of all these people? Practice. 20 years of navigating this world teaches you who matters and who's just noise. Dante glanced at her. You'll be fine. Just stay close to me, follow my lead, and remember, we're newlyweds who can't keep our hands off each other. Elena's cheeks heated. I thought we were supposed to seem comfortable, not passionate. A slight smile played at Dante's lips. There's a difference between seeming comfortable and seeming in love. We need to project both. Don't worry, I won't make you uncomfortable. Just small touches, hand-holding, maybe my arm around your waist. Natural couple behavior. The restaurant was located in the West Village, its exterior understated with only a small gold placard marking the entrance. But inside, it was pure elegance. Low lighting, white tablecloths, the murmur of expensive conversation and clinking crystal. A host greeted them immediately. "Mr. Romano, Mrs. Romano, welcome. Your table is ready." Heads turned as they walked through the restaurant. Elena felt eyes following them, heard whispers starting. This was the moment. Dante Romano's mysterious new wife making her debut in his world. Their table was positioned perfectly, visible to the rest of the restaurant but slightly elevated, marking them as VIPs. A bottle of wine appeared immediately, poured by a sommelier who treated them like royalty. "Smile," Dante murmured, his hand finding hers on the table. "You look terrified." "I am terrified." "Don't be. You're perfect." He squeezed her hand gently. "Just talk to me like we're on a normal date. Tell me about your day." Elena took a sip of wine. It was excellent, probably expensive, wasted on her nervous palate. "I spent most of it panicking about tonight." Dante's smile was genuine this time. "Honest. I appreciate that. What else?" "I called my brother. He told me his case is being reviewed." "It is. The prosecutor I spoke with is very motivated to avoid embarrassment over wrongful convictions. Marcus should have a hearing within 6 weeks." 6 weeks? Elena's eyes stung with sudden emotion. "Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but you don't need to thank me. This was our agreement." But Dante's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it seemed unconscious. "How are you adjusting to the penthouse?" "It's beautiful. Overwhelming but beautiful. Too big? Too everything. I've never lived anywhere that nice. You'll get used to it." Dante's dark eyes studied her. "I want you to be comfortable there, Elena. It's your home now, at least for the next 2 years. Change anything you want. Furniture, artwork, paint colors. Make it yours." Their appetizers arrived, some kind of pasta dish that looked like art on a plate. Elena took a bite and nearly moaned at how good it was. "Better than the diner?" Dante asked, amusement in his voice. "The diner has its charms. You're still planning to work there?" "Our contract says I can." "It does." Dante set down his fork. "I'm not trying to control you, Elena. I just want to understand. Most people in your position would enjoy not having to work." Elena met his eyes. "I'm not most people. That job is mine. Something I earned. Something that's not connected to you or this arrangement. I need that." After a long moment, Dante nodded. "I understand. But if you change your mind—" "I won't." "Stubborn," says the man who built a criminal empire from nothing. The words came out before Elena could stop them. Dante's expression hardened slightly, reminding her exactly who she was talking to. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A real laugh, deep and genuine. "Fair point." He raised his wine glass. "To stubbornness. May it serve us both well." Elena clinked her glass against his, surprised by how natural it felt. Around them the restaurant hummed with life and conversation. She noticed people stealing glances, saw smartphones being raised for subtle photos. "We're being watched," she murmured. "Always are." Dante's hand moved to her face, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate, intimate. To Elena, it felt like performance art. "Get used to it. This is our lives now." The evening progressed with surprising ease. Dante was a skilled conversationalist, asking questions that made Elena talk about herself, her childhood, her dreams before everything fell apart, her favorite books and movies. He listened intently, filing away details like he was studying for an exam. They were interrupted several times by people stopping at their table. Antonio and Maria Rossi, just as Dante had predicted, asking endless questions about how they'd met, when they'd decided to marry, why they'd kept it so quiet. "When you know, you know," Dante said smoothly, his arm draped across the back of Elena's chair. "I saw Elena and couldn't imagine my life without her." Elena smiled, playing along. He was persistent. "Persistent is one word for it," Maria laughed. "Dante, you old romantic." "Who knew?" Grant Morrison, the councilman, congratulated them with political polish. Victoria Chen, the society columnist, studied Elena with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're not what I expected," Victoria said bluntly. "Dante Romano's wife. Most people thought he'd marry some socialite or model. You're Normal. Elena bristled at the implicit insult, but Dante's hand tightened slightly on her shoulder, a warning to stay calm. That's exactly why I married her, Dante said, his voice warm. I've spent my whole life surrounded by artifice and performance. Elena is real, genuine. She reminds me that there's more to life than business and reputation. Victoria jotted notes in a small notebook. How sweet. When's the big ceremony? I heard you only did City Hall. We wanted something intimate, Elena improvised. Maybe we'll have a bigger celebration for our anniversary. Victoria didn't look convinced, but she smiled politely. Well, congratulations. I'm sure my readers will be fascinated by New York's newest power couple. After Victoria left, Elena sagged slightly in her chair. That was exhausting. You did well. Dante signaled for the check, though Elena suspected he wouldn't actually pay. This was his restaurant after all. First public appearance survived. Only about 100 more to go. 103, if my count is accurate. Dante stood, offering his hand to help Elena up. But who's counting? The drive back to the penthouse was quieter. Elena felt drained, her face sore from smiling, her mind buzzing from wine and adrenaline. When they arrived at her building, Dante got out of the car with her. I'll walk you up, he said. You don't have to. I want to. They rode the elevator in silence. At her door, Elena fumbled with her keys, suddenly awkward. This was like the end of a real date, except it wasn't real at all. Thank you for tonight, she said. For being easier than I expected. Dante smiled slightly. What were you expecting? I don't know. More demands, more control. You've been surprisingly respectful. I told you I would be. He reached out, adjusting her necklace, a gesture that would look affectionate to any security cameras watching. We're partners in this, Elena. Equals, even if the situation isn't equal. I meant what I said in the restaurant. You remind me there's more to life than what I've built. I won't ruin that by being a tyrant. Elena's heart did something complicated in her chest. Not quite attraction, but something close to it. Respect, maybe. Understanding. Good night, Dante. Good night, Mrs. Romano. He waited until she was inside before returning to the elevator. Elena leaned against the closed door, her emotions tangled. The evening had been successful. They'd looked like a real couple, convinced the right people played their roles perfectly. So why did it feel like something had shifted? Like the line between performance and reality was already starting to blur? Elena pushed away from the door, telling herself she was tired, overthinking things. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. But as she got ready for bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Dante had looked at her during dinner, the way his touch had felt almost genuine, the way for brief moments she'd forgotten they were acting. 2 years suddenly felt like a very long time. 3 months passed. Elena and Dante's public appearances became routine. Galas, dinners, charity events. But something shifted between them. Conversations grew longer. Touches lingered. The act became harder to distinguish from reality. Marcus was released in February. His record cleared. Elena sobbed in Dante's arms when she got the news, and he held her like it meant something. Then came the threat. Victor Russo discovered Dante's vulnerability. Elena. His men cornered her outside the penthouse one evening. Tell Romano to back off our territory or you disappear. Dante's response was immediate and fierce. Within 24 hours, Russo's operation was dismantled through legal channels Elena had helped him build. Connections to prosecutors, documented evidence. No violence. Just justice. You changed me, Dante admitted that night in the penthouse. Made me want to be better than what I was. Elena touched his face. You were always better. You just needed a reason to show it. The kiss was real this time. No cameras, no audience. Just two people who'd found something unexpected in an arrangement that was never supposed to mean anything. 6 months later, they renewed their vows. A real ceremony with Marcus as best man. The contract expired, but neither mentioned it. Some marriages start with love. Theirs started with survival and became something neither could live without. 3 months into their arrangement, the pretending became harder. Elena found herself laughing genuinely at Dante's dry humor. He started calling just to hear her voice. Marcus was released in February, his record expunged. Elena wept with joy, and Dante held her without hesitation. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. You gave me something too, he replied quietly. A reason to be better. The threat came from Russo's organization. Retaliation for Marcus's freedom. They cornered Elena outside a charity event, demanding Dante surrender territory. Instead, Dante chose her. He worked with prosecutors Elena had connected him to, dismantling Russo's empire legally. No violence, just justice. You were supposed to be a contract, Elena said that night, touching his face. You were supposed to be convenient, Dante answered. But you became everything. Their kiss was real. No cameras, no audience. A year later, Marcus stood as best man at their real wedding. The contract had expired, but neither noticed. What began as survival became love neither expected but both desperately needed. Some relationships start with passion. Theirs started with necessity and became redemption.